Okay, so now we're in the next section, strings and objects. So again, I've already planted some seeds early on in the earlier chapters. So now we're about to add to it. We're going to cultivate. I want to make sure you understand that I'm taking you through a process. Do not ignore the process. And that's a lot of the times what happens, why people struggle and why your confidence level is so low, is because you're not respecting the process. When you don't respect the process won't respect you. So it's important that we continue to add to what we've already learned. Again, in this particular section, we're learning about the strings, the collection of strings, the collection of characters. We learn something about indexing. I want you to focus on that. Indexing, and it starts with 0. Anything less than 0 is not an index. Anything more than what you have in the collection, you're not going to get a result that you're looking for. So continue to practice, continue to do, keep doing. Also, if you landed on this particular content and you're not a part of the cohort, you can follow along with the curriculum because the link is in the description. Go ahead. It's a free resource. You don't have to pay anything for it, and you can learn as well. So let's get into the curriculum. Here, strings and objects. Beyond bracket notation, there are many other tools we can use to work with strings. Talking about these tools requires some new terminology. Object terminology. Again, I planted a seed earlier. Everything in JavaScript is an object except fill in the blank. All right. In JavaScript, strings are objects. So to understand how we can use them in our programs, we must first understand some basic about objects. An object is a collection of related data and operations. Understand, it's a collection of related data and operations. What is an operation? We talked about operations earlier. An operation that can be carried out on an object is known as a method. A piece of data associated with an object is known as a property. Remember, we talked about length. I'm going to go over this right here. Here in this example, suppose we had a square object in JavaScript. While no such object is built into JavaScript, we will learn how we could make one in a later chapter. Since a square has 4 sides of the same length, it should have a property to represent this length. This property could be called length for a given square. It will have a specific value such as 4. Now remember, I told you earlier, we kind of said that length was a method, kinda, but the reality of it is length is a property. And I want you to be able to identify the difference between properties and methods. Methods have parentheses. Properties don't. And length is a property. For a given square, it will have a specific value such as 4. Since a square has an area, it should have a method to calculate the area. This method could be called area, and it should calculate the area of a square using the length property. Like I said, abstraction, I introduced and planted a seed about abstraction. There are methods that you do not create, that you didn't write, but there are going to be some methods that you will. And so here we're introducing to you the importance of creating your own methods. So here, area can be a method. A method is a verb, it's an action, okay? Now, you can think of methods and properties as functions and variables, respectively, that belongs to an object. Remember, every variable that you create is now an object. Know the difference between the data types though. A primitive data type string is not an object. Why? Because it's immutable. Remember that. But once I put that primitive data type inside of a variable, it now becomes an object. And objects are mutable unless I make it immutable. Okay. Now, properties and methods are assessed using dot notation. That's why I call it an access modifier. I planted that seed earlier, which dictates that we use the object's name followed by a dot, followed by the property or method name. When using a method, we must also use parentheses as we do when we're calling regular functions. And we'll explain more as we go further. But now we're planting the seed. Returning the square example, or returning to the square example, we can access its length by typing square.length. We can calculate the area by calling square.area. Square is the object, which is a variable that we created. Referring length or area by itself in code does not give you the value of the square. This is why we use that dot as an access modifier, because square is the actual object. Length is the property that wants to get access to what the object is holding. So therefore, if you just use length by itself, it does nothing. It's an action on something, and the action that is performing is on this particular object. Now, or carried out the calculations in square.area, it does not make sense to refer to a property or method without also referring to the associated object. Typing simply length or area is ambiguous. There might be multiple squares and it would be unclear which one you are asking for. So we need to make sure we use them together. They work synonymous together. Although they're separate, but they work together. We have also encountered one object, and I planted the seed earlier, console. It's a built-in object that this is abstraction you did not create, which we use to output the message. The type of console it tells you is an object. So if you go ahead and let's inspect that, go to our inspector, click on console, clear that out. Let's paste that in. Let's go ahead and paste it in. And now if I run it, it gives me an object. This is how you're able to figure out what the type of each object is. So JavaScript reports that the type of console is indeed an object. When calling console.log, we are calling the log method of the console object. We will learn quite a bit more about objects in this course, including how to use objects to create your own custom data types. This powerful JavaScript feature allows us to bundle up data and functionality in useful modular ways. Strings are objects. The fact that strings are objects mean that they have associated data and operations or properties and methods, as we will call them from now on. Every string that works with will have the same properties and methods. The most useful string property is named length, and it tells us how many characters are in a string. So here we are, we have a variable that we have declared, initialized with the string Grace. First name is the variable. Last name is the variable. Grace and Hopper are the data type, which are strings. First name and last name have now become objects. The strings have become now objects because they're inside the variable. Now we're doing what? First name has first name dot length characters. These are what we're console logging out. We're using the name. Remember, when you're passing in a variable name, you do not need quotations, but has is a string. And notice something different here. We're not using the plus sign. We're using a comma to separate each one of these items. That's something new that we just added. We were using the plus sign to concatenate, but now we're using a comma. So there's something new that we just added to what you've just learned. So here you have options. You can use the comma to separate it, which we kind of introduced it to you early on, but now you're kind of seeing the difference now, because even later on, we're not even going to use the plus sign. We're going to use what we call template literals for our strings. So here, every string has a length. Remember, the key word here is every string has a length. Remember, every string is a collection of characters, and they're index based. It will make even more sense when we get into arrays. The length property is the only string property that we will use, but there are many useful string methods. We will explore these in depth in the section Reference String Methods, but let's look at one now to give you an idea of what's ahead. The to lowercase, this is a method, and notice because it has the parentheses at the end. The string method returns the value of its string in all lowercase letters. Since it is a method, we must precede it with a specific string in order to use it. You got to know how to use this, because this will throw errors if you use it incorrectly. So here we created another variable. We declared it and we initialized it with a string called LaunchCode. LaunchCode, the string, is now stored in the nonprofit variable, which is an object. I can get access to it for this dot access modifier. And then I'm passing a method called to lowercase, which will now make all of these letters lowercase when I console.log it. Now we did console.log twice, so you can see the difference. So here it's being changed to all lowercase, but notice we didn't destroy it. All we did was modify it. So this did not destroy it. Some methods would change the actual object, and we'll talk about those later. But this particular method, all it did was it altered it. It manipulated it, but it didn't destroy it. And we'll explain what that means later on. But now again, I'm planting the seed. And so we see that LaunchCode, all the letters are lowercase. There's a use case for this. Sometimes when a person, especially when they're inputting information into a field, you're going to maybe want to convert it to a number, because you may want a number that you want to add as opposed to concatenate a string. Or you may want to lowercase it so that it can be stored in your database a certain way, so everything can be consistent. So again, we want everything to make sense. We need consistency. This is why we use certain methods, why we are using certain conversion functions, because we want consistency. So Notice that the two lowercase does not alter the string itself, but instead returns the result of converting the string to all lowercase characters. In fact, it is not possible to alter the characters within a string, as we will now see. So we're going to check our understanding here. But like I said, strings are immutable. Once you put that string inside of an object, you can make some changes, and we're going to explore that in upcoming lessons. So we made it to the end of this section. Now remember, the more you do, the more you will improve. See you in the next section.